In November 2024, at the World Knowledge Forum 2024, Professor Michael Beckley delivered a compelling analysis of China's economic slowdown and its far-reaching consequences for global stability. Michael Beckley, an associate professor of political science at Tufts University, a non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and the director of the Asia program at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, provided key insights and essential points in his presentation. This video summarizes his speech, delving into Professor Beckley's expert analysis. He explored critical questions surrounding China's economic decline, potential strategies Beijing might employ, and the looming threat of military conflict over Taiwan and the South China Sea. The video also examines the strength of China's alliances with Russia and North Korea, its role in the war in Ukraine, and its ongoing support for Pyongyang. Drawing from historical precedents and contemporary analysis, this video offers a comprehensive look at the geopolitical dynamics shaping the future of world order during this pivotal decade of Sino-American rivalry. Professor Beckley's core points include 1. Understanding China's economic reversal. Professor Beckley presents compelling evidence suggesting that China's economic rise is not simply slowing down, but actively reversing. China's economic size is shrinking compared to the United States, even when considering Chinese government data, which is known to exaggerate GDP growth. This contraction is further validated by alternative metrics like electricity usage, revealing that China's economy might be at least 20% smaller than officially reported. The decline is attributed to several key factors. Negative productivity growth. Despite massive investments, China's productivity has been mostly negative for over a decade, with the exception of a brief period following the 2021 reopening after the zero-COVID policy. This signifies a concerning trend of diminishing efficiency, with China spending more resources to generate less output. Resource depletion. China's rapid industrialization and economic expansion have strained its natural resources. The country is grappling with severe water scarcity, polluted groundwater, and desertification. These factors contribute to significantly higher raw material costs, making economic growth considerably more expensive compared to the early 2000s. Demographic challenges. China's one-child policy, implemented in the late 1970s to address concerns about overpopulation, has created a demographic time bomb. The once beneficial baby boom generation is now aging rapidly, shrinking the workforce while simultaneously increasing the burden on the smaller, succeeding generation. Over the next decade, China anticipates a loss of 70 million working-age adults and a gain of 130 million senior citizens, dramatically altering the worker-to-retiree ratio and putting immense pressure on the social safety net and economic productivity. Prioritizing political control over economic efficiency, Professor Beckley argues that the current Chinese leadership prioritizes maintaining political power at the expense of economic efficiency. This is exemplified by policies like the zero-COVID lockdowns, the crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong, and preferential treatment given to state-connected firms. Such actions stifle innovation, risk-taking, and economic adaptability, ultimately hindering sustainable growth. 2. Global impacts of China's economic slowdown. The slowdown of the Chinese economy, once the engine of global growth, has significant ramifications worldwide. Many countries, particularly in the developing world, heavily relied on China's robust demand for their exports and its generous loans for infrastructure development. However, as China's growth falters, its imports are shrinking, negatively impacting the economies of its trading partners. South Korea, Germany, and commodity exporters like Australia, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil are experiencing significant drops in their exports to China. Further aggravating the situation is China's shift in lending practices. No longer a ready source of easy loans, China now demands repayment of outstanding debts, pushing many vulnerable economies into debt distress. Cases like Venezuela, Zambia, and Pakistan illustrate the struggles faced by countries burdened with Chinese debt. To compound these challenges, China is engaging in practices that exacerbate global trade imbalances. By heavily subsidizing its domestic industries, China is flooding global markets with cheap exports, squeezing out competitors and widening trade deficits for many countries. These actions have fueled anti-China sentiment and eroded its international standing. 3. China's response. A peaking power's predictable behavior. Professor Beckley suggests that China is reacting to these internal and external pressures in a manner consistent with historical examples of peaking powers. Instead of adopting a more conciliatory approach, China appears to be doubling down on control and aggression, raising concerns about potential global instability. The following trends underscore this argument. Domestic repression. Professor Beckley identifies a concerning rise in domestic repression within China, mirroring the characteristics of a fascist regime. This includes the veneration of Xi Jinping as a central leader, the propagation of hypernationalism and narratives of historical victimhood, the brutal suppression of ethnic minorities, particularly in Xinjiang, and the establishment of an Orwellian surveillance state. These measures are seen as attempts to consolidate power and control amidst growing economic uncertainty and social anxiety. Shifting economic strategy towards leverage and coercion. Faced with slowing growth, China is seemingly shifting its economic strategy from emphasizing expansion to focusing on leverage. This involves controlling critical sectors of the global economy, creating choke points that can be exploited to exert influence over other countries. The willingness to impose economic sanctions, as evidenced by the trade war with Australia following its call for an investigation into the origins of COVID-19, demonstrates China's more assertive and coercive approach. Massive military buildup and aggressive posturing. China's significant military buildup is another alarming indicator of its response to a perceived decline. The country is investing heavily in modernizing and expanding its military capabilities, evident in the rapid expansion of its navy, its growing nuclear arsenal, and increased military exercises in strategically sensitive areas like the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. This buildup is accompanied by more assertive behavior, including harassing Filipino vessels in the South China Sea and engaging in skirmishes with Indian troops along the disputed border. Strengthening ties with autocratic regimes. China's alignment with other autocratic and revisionist powers like Russia, North Korea, and Iran is viewed as a strategic maneuver to counter Western influence and advance its own geopolitical goals. These partnerships provide economic and military support to these regimes, potentially enabling them to challenge the existing international order. 4. Potential for conflict and future scenarios. Professor Beckley acknowledges the heightened risk of conflict stemming from China's actions and its rivalry with the United States. Historically, great power rivalries rarely conclude peacefully, often culminating in major wars that reshape the global power balance. The inherent credible commitment problem in such situations, where concessions by one side could be perceived as weakness and exploited by the other, makes peaceful resolutions difficult. Despite these concerns, Professor Beckley offers a glimmer of hope for a peaceful resolution in the long term. As China's economic challenges mount and its demographic decline deepens, it might be forced to reconsider its aggressive expansionist policies. A potential bargain could emerge, where China accepts limits on its regional ambitions in exchange for continued access to the global economic system and security guarantees. However, such a scenario is predicated on a shift in the power balance, either through China's economic slowdown or a weakening of the United States. Until then, a Cold War dynamic between the U.S. and China is likely to persist, characterized by intense competition, technological rivalry, and the potential for regional conflicts. While a Cold War could stimulate innovation in areas like artificial intelligence and climate change mitigation, it also represents a period of heightened risk, especially given China's peaking power status and its historical proclivity towards aggression. Navigating this turbulent period will require careful diplomacy, strategic alliances, and a clear understanding of the complex dynamics at play.